From WBRN Radio in Boston on the Boston Red Network. This is BR on the World, our international affairs program. The episode, Mr. Trump Meets Mr. Moon. The President, DJ Trump, is in the People's Republic of Korea on an official state visit, and we have a summary here and their press conference. It is in both Korean and in English. Very little was said about what was going on, but basically Trump at one time had promised fire and fury across the Korean peninsula. Now it's to maybe negotiate and maybe not. We're not certain about exactly what he means. In his press conference, come to the table and discuss giving up its nuclear weapons. Not going to happen. And anyone, as LBJ would said, has been to a goat roping contest would know that. His dialogue with President Moon has been probably very tense in that his whole scenario. DJ Trump told the Koreans if they buy U.S. weaponry, they could be defended. In other words, he's on a what would be called a sales trip. It's down to a sales pitch. Will the Korean government buy that? Very, very doubtful. His first stop, as you recall, was in Japan. On his way, his next stop will be in China, and he will meet with President Xi. In other words, President Xi and the Chinese Communist Party have just concluded their 19th party conference, and they laid out the way ahead. The Democratic Republic of Korea, on the other hand, headed by Mr. Kimjong-un, Mr. otherwise known via DJ Trump's Twitter, which was shut down last week temporarily, as Smart Cookie, Rocket Man. Now he's Little Rocket Man. And I guess next he'll be known as the Deal Maker. But deal maker or no deal maker, this is a very serious situation. All parties know it. They went to the U.S., that is, to France and various other good auspices to try to get something going. But the situation there could be stabilized very simply if the major parties on the border of the Democratic Republic of Korea, that is the Chinese government and the Russian Federation, just simply make declarations whereby if the Trump administration in its most adventurous stance attacks the Democratic Republic of Korea, they would retaliate, thus creating a World War III. And now even these simpletons that DJ Trump has for generals would think about that at least for 5 minutes. We don't know how long after that they would think about it. But this is a situation that you don't wallpaper over. In the press conference, DJ Trump also referred to the massacre down in Texas, basically saying if the individual next door had not had a gun, well, everybody has a gun in Texas, and when came out there would have been more people killed, perhaps hundreds. Well, we hate to tell DJ Trump, the church only normally had 100 or less people. We don't know how many people were there, but there were not hundreds of people there. Effectively what happened was he shot the assailant, and the assailant fled, and of course he lost control of his SUV and died, and that is simply closed the case. It was partially a domestic affair, as reported, but we don't know the whole thing. This character had been in the Air Force, and he'd had a domestic abuse charge there, and he was discharged less than honorable. Thus, he would have not been able to obtain a gun through the legal process. He had a Ruger. He got it, as far as we know, legally, and he used it. But DJ Trump and this pandering to the National Rifle Association and others, you will see more and more of these. Now, there's been a lot of polling out there as to where the so-called gun laws are. It's not a priority with this administration, period. There was a ban on the assault rifles, but at this point in time, the unfortunate problem is on the ground. Anyone that needs an assault rifle, under President Barack Obama, when he was elected, people went out and bought all the guns they could literally take home in their whatever. And now that this new administration is there, the gun dealers are not selling as many guns because everyone's already bought a gun. Actually, several guns. If we look at the gentleman out in Las Vegas that had enough guns to literally outfit a small army. So you have more and more firepower out there. But when you have an administration like this that looks at it from a very simplistic standpoint, for those outside the U.S., it is difficult to comprehend. But we did have, as a late great Jerry Pippin, our broadcast partner, used to say, that we had situations that in the Wild Wild West, in places like Tombstone, etc., when people came into the town marshal would take out the guns. Now, people could carry guns, sidearms, and etc., but they left them with the town marshal. So you had some sorts of civilization. The gun laws in this country came about, the modern gun laws. There were virtually none until the administration in California won Ronald Reagan, that later became a right-wing president. A political organization called the Black Panther Party marched into the legislative chambers in Sacramento, California, displaying long guns or rifles or whatever you want to call them, was perfectly permissible in California. They passed the first gun law in California after that, based upon a right-wing agitation. That's how gun laws started. And later, we had in many, many jurisdictions, Chicago, etc., to legally carry a firearm was very, very difficult. You had to go through a licensing process, normally from the county. In Chicago, it would have been Cook County. And in D.C., it was forbidden to have a handgun there. Now, you could have long guns and rifles. That was always permissible. And in many other jurisdictions, in Illinois, if I remember when I lived in Chicago, you could have long guns, but handguns were not permissible. Then the gun laws all changed, and in all 50 states now, there is some licensing process and some not. I think Arizona doesn't have one, that you can be licensed to carry a sidearm. But now a gun like the one the guy Kelly used in Texas, you don't need a license for that. You just go through a little process, sign a slip of paper, and they run a check. And if you're not in the databases, you're there. Now, if he would have bought this, say, at a gun show, which is like a bazaar for guns, firearms, the licensing requirements are totally different. Or if he bought it from an individual, that would have not been in the licensing requirements. And you don't need a license to buy ammo. So in other words, he would have had the gun, gun in his case, willy-nilly. But most of these people have several guns. So I'm not sure. That came up in the news conference afterwards. It was about a 10-minute news conference. You will hear it here. And you will also hear some commentary from Koreans that are protesting against a U.S. deployed so-called missile defense system there in the People's Republic of Korea. This will do it for us. Mr. Trump meets Mr. Moon Jae-un is the title of this episode from WBRN Radio and BR on the World. We'll work with the title here, but so far there are probably, if I recall correctly, 50-something episodes. We'll have more. We'll be covering, incidentally, the Trump trip to China. We had planned to do it, and to Vietnam. We had not planned to do Korea, but Korea is equated with a possible nuclear war. This whole scenario about Korea is a defensive situation from the standpoint of the Democratic Republic. And there's no doubt about it, if they did not have nuclear weapons, they would have been overrun a long time ago. They're not going to give those up, period, and they can become accommodative to that, or the bottom line is they will have fire and they will have fury. They will possibly have a nuclear confrontation, and the best statistics that I've seen with all of their so-called newfangled defense systems, we're talking about the U.S., there is a 20 to 10% chance that some of the missiles from the Democratic Republic of Korea would strike their targets. Either in Seoul or in Tokyo now, about going to Los Angeles. We don't know on that one. But the whole point is, if any of those missiles land in the Tokyo area of Japan with all the earthquake faults, you would have bedlam there, no doubt about it. And in Korea, well, that would cease to be a competitive economy with the U.S. And on top of that, you would have hundreds, if not thousands, of American troops would lose their lives in just the artillery battles, and of course, obviously, 1 million Koreans or more. So it's a very, very serious situation. It's not something that you go at in this normal type of American PR based upon the Wilsonian foreign policy. It's named after Woodrow Wilson, a racist that occupied the Oval Office at one time and was a sympathizer, like this character Kelly that's DJ Trump's chief of staff, with the Confederacy, which was a fascist regime that fought to uphold a racist slave economy. And they were defeated. But at the same time, they were able to put together the same type of propaganda that we say today, as our soulmate H says, basically turn things upside down. The facts become falsehoods, falsehoods become facts, and is acceptable to the supporters of DJ Trump and the alt-right people in general. But that has always been the case. We had the Birches, we had various kinds of theories out there for a very, very long time, and the right-wing GOP has run candidates as they are today. Today, incidentally, in many states and municipalities, we also have that up on many of our outlets under the Boston Red franchise. In the state of Virginia, there's a race there, and it's run on the same thing as this Kelly, the Confederate memorials to fascism. Very big part of it in Sanctuary City, an anti-immigrant movement as such as you have in Europe. So in other words, these things all run a parallel. There are other contests out in the west coast city of Seattle between a traditional so-called Democrat, a big business Democrat, and a progressive named Carrie Moon. And then we go into the Midwest, in the upper Midwest, actually, Minnesota, the Twin Cities. They have elections there. They're using a racist system called ranked choice. You effectively can vote for 3 candidates, 1, 2, and 3, which the other 2 would not. Traditionally in the U.S., we have primary elections, as we did in Seattle, and the 2 that come out of it, the top 2, then we have a runoff. Now, many times, as in Chicago, worked in a contest that Harold Washington, he was the first African-American mayor of Chicago, was simply got a plurality. In other words, about 37-38% of the vote. He won the Democratic primary. And as the civil rights campaign of Jesse Jackson said, we did not have 50 plus 1. But 50 plus 1 is much better than a ranked choice situation, because there, if there's not a top vote getter, in other words, that gets 50% of the vote, then the one that's in third place is dropped off, and the second place votes are counted, and so forth and so on, and added until we get a winner. in the contest. So that is the way that works. So those are some of the municipal, and also here in Boston, we have a mayoral race between the Mayor Walsh, and our own Tito Jackson, trying to be the first African-American mayor of Boston, but he's well behind in the polls. Unfortunately, that is the landscape of Boston. There's also a mayoral contest in New York today. Haven't heard much polling on it, but Mayor de Blasio, is the current mayor, is ahead of his opponents there in New York and across the country. We go. There will be one in New Orleans, in Atlanta, Georgia, elections there. So we'll be back tonight on many of these channels, on iHeart, on Spreaker, on Stitcher, and various others, recapping the election later tonight. Good day from WBRN Radio and BR on the World.
Research fellow at the Korean Peninsula Future Forum think tank in the capital, Seoul. There are some, aren't there, who regard President Trump as much of a threat to the South as the nuclear ambitions of the North. How loud are their voices on this day of visit?
Well, as you may hear in the background, President Trump supporters, as well as anti-Trump supporters, are gathered in the downtown Sejongno area right now where I am. My offices are located, and greeting the president as he is on his way to the presidential Blue House. And they show a representative of the South Korean public who have mixed feelings about the visit of the U.S. president. That's
very interesting. So the mixed visits are visible there. I hope is it good-tempered? What are they doing? Singing slogans, waving placards?
Yes, the pro-Trump supporters, mostly comprised of the older and more conservative generation, have been singing songs. I just heard them singing by the rivers of Babylon.
Why would they sing that to welcome the president? I'm interested.
I have. Some of them are actually representatives of the Christian community in Korea, and they have changed bits of the lyrics to welcome the president. It has been a little bit muffled for me to hear the exact lyrics, but the lyrics are in Korean.
That's a very good... right, okay, so he goes past the singing demonstrators, he gets to the Blue House. What kind of a meeting is he going to have with President Moon, who, after all, was elected on, a policy of more friendship, more openness towards the North, at the time that in the background the president is issuing blood-curdling threats against the North. So how do you think that talk is going to go?
That is a very good point that you have gone over. President Moon has been elected in the past May on the wave of anti-corruption protests against the former President Park Geun-hye. And President Moon has promised that he will have a more open, more dialogue with North Korea in order to resolve this issue. But since he took office, he promised that he will have a more open, more dialogue with North Korea in order to resolve this issue. But since he took office, he has been acting more in line with the U.S. and Japan in showing a more stauncher force on sanctions against North Korea and regarding all matters regarding the nuclear threat. So the recent tete-a-tete, let's say back-to-back name-calling by the U.S. President Trump towards North Korean Kim-jong-un and vice versa, have put South Korean President Moon in a very precarious situation. He has to make good on his promise of more dialogue with North Korea. But on the other hand, he has to be in line with his staunch allies, the US and Japan, in regards to North Korea.
And one thing, there has often been a sort of great attention paid to the timing of the North's missile tests and nuclear tests. They often make a statement. They happen in an attempt to overshadow something that's going on elsewhere. With such a major visit as Trump visiting South Korea, are there any fears that something might be planned to the North?
Well, there are such fears, yes, especially because President Trump has scheduled a press conference today, following just before the meeting with President Moon Jae-in, as well as afterwards, to announce the results of the state visit. So we have to see what will happen. But so far, there haven't been much signs of any military provocations by North Korea.
Right.
We have to see what will happen.
Well, many thanks indeed for the colour, apart from anything else, as well as the analysis from Seoul. That was Hee Jun-in of the Korean Peninsula Future Forum think tank.
To war. This, of course, is our top headline this hour. Let's get sports headlines now with Kirsten Webster. Yeah, David.
시끄러우면 못 살겠어. 시방도 윙윙 돌아가는 소리, 비행기 소리, 경찰들도 노 안 떨어지고 막 들랑거리지. 짜도 저 갖다 놓으면 기름이야 무엇이야 막 비 오면 막 단위로 온다 이래. 그런 때문에 짜도는 보내. 옛날에 북한 사람들 피난할 때 북한 사람들 왔잖아. 니로 왔잖아. 이래도 요새 여 경찰들 받아가 더 순하고 더 좋았어. 옛날에 얼마나 점장 있다 갔다고. 그런데 막 여 경찰들은 막 여 꺼냈다. 막 꺼내 동네 사람. 그래가 왜 사노? 할매고 먹고 없어 다 끌어내고. 덩거리 질질 꺼이가지고 여 막 끌어내면 덩거리 다 뻗어지고 팔 다 뻗어지고 못하면 죽다 살았잖아 동네 사람이.
대한민국에 오신 것을 환영합니다. 한국의 아름다운 문화를 만끽하시기 바랍니다. 대한민국의 성숙한 민주주의와 눈부신 경제 성장도 함께 확인하고 가시면 고맙겠습니다. 지금부터
다시 한번 강력히 촉구합니다. 트럼프 대통령과 저는 북한이 스스로 핵을 포기하고 진지한 대화에 나설 때까지 했습니다. 동시에 북한이 올바른 선택을 할 경우 밝은 미래를 제공할 준비가 되어 있음도 제가 확인하였습니다. 우리는 이러한 공동의 접근 방법을 바탕으로 북핵 문제의 평화에 나갈 수 있는 전환적인 대응을 기대합니다. 트럼프 대통령과 저는 오늘 한미동맹의 미래와 대한민국의 기여를 상징적으로 보여주는 평택 기지를 함께 방문했습니다. 트럼프 대통령과 저는 한미가 앞으로도 합리적 수준의 방위비를 분담함으로써 동맹의 연합한 태세와 능력을 지속적으로 확인하는 것을 재확인하였습니다. 지속 가능하고 미래지향적인 한미동맹을 동맹으로 발전시키기 위한 중요한 요소라는 것에도 인식을 같이 했습니다. 자유롭고 공정한 안전상을 하게끔 한미끼리 안전 협의를 지속하게 진행하도록 했습니다. 그러므로 대통령과 저는 한미 양국이 보편적 가치와 경제적 건전의 과실을 인도와 함께 도전 과제인 테러리즘, 여성, 인권, 보건 등에 대한 협력도 계속 강화해 나가기로 했습니다. 우리 주 정상은 국민 간 미화 연대를 이끌은 삼아 앞으로도 한미 동맹을 더욱 공고히 다져 나갈 것입니다. 다시 한번 여러분께
감사합니다. 문재인 대통령의 모두 발언이었습니다. 지금부터 트럼프
by President Moon Jae-in, which was
Very beautiful city of Seoul. Thank you very much. Melania and I had a wonderful time having tea with you and First Lady Kim. Thank you. At the beautiful Blue House, which I've heard so much about, and now get to visit and see firsthand. We're looking forward to joining you for dinner this evening, and we have much to discuss. Today, the President and I had an opportunity to range of vital economic and security matters, including our trade relationship and our joint efforts to solve North Korea's grave nuclear threat to South Korea and indeed the entire world. This is a worldwide problem. The Republic of Korea is more than a long-standing ally of the United States. We are partners and friends who have fought side by side in a war and will be able to reach a free, fair, and reciprocal trade deal as we renegotiate our current 5-year-old trade document. We cannot allow North Korea to threaten all that we have built. And we've built it very much together, and we're very, very proud of it also together. But all that we built in the decades since our soldiers sacrificed side by side and security on the Korean Peninsula and across the Indo-Pacific region. That is why Vice President Pence, Secretary of State Tillerson, who's with us also in the first year of my administration, is very important to me that they did. North Korea's sixth test of a nuclear device and its missile of lives so needlessly. North Korea is a worldwide threat that requires worldwide action. We call on every responsible nation, including China and Russia, to demand that the North Korean regime and live in peace. As the South Korean people know so well, it's time to act with urgency and with great determination. All nations must implement UN Security Council regulations and cease trade and business entirely with North Korea. It is unacceptable that nations would help to arm and finance this increasingly dangerous regime. As we work together to resolve this problem using all available tools short of military action, the United States stands prepared to defend itself and its allies using the full range of our unmatched military capabilities if need be. The crucial U.S. security partnership with South Korea is just one aspect of our enduring alliance. We also share deep partnerships on a range of issues, from cultural exchange to cutting-edge advances in science and medicine, and President Moon for instructing his trade negotiators to work closely with us to quickly pursue a much better deal, a deal that frankly has been quite unsuccessful and not very good for the United States. In the more than 6 decades since we signed our mutual defense, serve the interests of their people, respect the sovereignty of their neighbors, and uphold the rule of law. Imagine the amazing possibilities for a Korean peninsula liberated from the threat of nuclear in South Korea. I also want to congratulate President Moon and the South Korean people on hosting the Winter Olympics this upcoming February. It will be a truly spectacular event. Mr. President, I want to thank you, First Lady Kim, and I mean it was just so special today. The ceremony was so beautiful. We very much thank you for it. Together, our two nations will handle threats to peace and security, stand up to those from the people of the United States of America. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Big
Thank you. First question from the United States, we go to Margaret Brennan from CBS.
Mr. President.
Which one?
President Trump. I have one question for both of you gentlemen. President Trump, you spoke here in South Korea saying that you do believe that the crisis with North Korea will be worked out. So specifically, have you seen any success in your diplomatic strategy so far? And do you still believe that direct talks are a waste of time?
Well, I think you know me well enough to know that I don't like talking about whether I see success or not. To come to the table and to make a deal that's good for the people of North Korea and the people of the world. I do see certain movement, yes, but let's see what happens. Understand.
And President Moon, you, in your meeting earlier with President Trump, were spoken about by President Trump when he gestured to the military purchases that your country will be making. And I'm wondering, as you look towards that military buildup, if that signals something, perhaps a change in your view, where you believe a more aggressive stance towards North Korea is more appropriate.
President Moon, between Korea and the United States has taken on the most important diplomatic challenges to be overcome the resolving the problem, the resolving the problem, and the cooperation between Korea and the United States. And you talked about the China's role. Are you referring to the balance between the summit meeting and the summit meeting we just had? You said that you have agreed to bring permanent peace settlement on the Korean and the U.S. for settling peace on the Korean Peninsula.
I want to just say that very, very helpful. So China's out trying very hard to solve the problem with North Korea. We hope that Russia likewise will be helpful. We also hope that other countries, and we know for a fact that other countries have already started, and we've had great dialogue with many other countries, as you know, and they're really helping a lot. So if we get China, if we get Russia, and we have some other countries, but we want to get most of them.
Thank you. United States second final question will go to Ali Vitale from NBC.
Part of South Korea. I will certainly answer your question. If you did what you're suggesting, there would have been no difference 3 days ago. And you might not have had that very brave person who happened to have a gun or a rifle in his truck go out and shoot him and hit him and neutralize him. And I can only say this, if he didn't have a gun, instead of having 26 dead, he would have had hundreds more dead. So that's the way I feel about it.
And are you
not going to help. Gun laws in our nation is Chicago. And Chicago is a disaster. It's a total disaster. Just remember, if this man didn't have a gun or a rifle, you'd be talking about a much worse situation in the great state of Texas. Thank you.
거기는 대한민국 정부에서는 9조 원이 투입돼 막대한 예산이 투입되고 있습니다. 아울러 평택이라는 지역 원주민들과의 갈등이 한 수년간 걸치면서 아주 힘겹게